When we talk about the digital world, we tend to use these words that make it sound completely, well, weightless.
Right, yeah, like
Yeah.
the cloud and all that.
Exactly. We call it the cloud. Or we talk about wireless connections or virtual realities. And it paints this incredibly peaceful picture.
Yeah, totally.
Like our data is just, it's floating ethereally up in the ether, quietly running our apps and storing our photos without leaving like any physical footprint at all.
It is brilliant marketing, honestly. I mean, it completely detaches the whole concept of the internet from the actual physical laws of nature.
Right.
You just think of it as pure, frictionless data.
But I mean, that is a massive and quite frankly, really dangerous illusion. So welcome to this deep dive into the Capital Clarity files.
Glad to be here.
Today, our mission is to explore this fascinating stack of strategic materials. They're these unredacted development scripts from a digital strategy channel called Capital Clarity, dated March 2026.
And they are eye-opening.
Oh, completely. They completely shatter this idea of a weightless internet.
Yeah.
Because the central theme cutting through all these sources is the shocking physical reality of our digital infrastructure.
Yeah, the physical footprint is just massive.
We're going to pull back the curtain today on the colossal high-stakes machinery that's keeping AI and the global economy running. And we'll look at how it's rapidly approaching a terrifying breaking point.
And this breaking point, I mean, it isn't just about running out of room for server farms in the desert somewhere.
No, not at all.
The Capital Clarity materials detail a full-blown infrastructure crisis, one that starts, deep underground with our water tables and extends literally up into the stars.
Which is where things get really wild and why we are unpacking this today. We need to connect the dots between the earthbound costs of this massive AI boom
Right.
and a looming catastrophic crisis up in orbit.
Right.
But let's start on solid ground, though.
Good idea.
Because when you dig into these files, the sheer resource intensity of the digital age is staggering. We picture the cloud as this weightless, ethereal thing floating above us, but down here on Earth, it's actually incredibly thirsty and power-hungry.
Yeah, thirsty is definitely the perfect word for it because the computational power required to process these massive neural networks.
The things running the large language models, right?
Exactly, the LLMs and the image generators, they require an entirely different scale of infrastructure than the old internet.
Right. There's a whole section here in the files analyzing what they call the silicon drought. And it details the hidden water cost of literally every single ChatGPT prompt.
It's wild to think about.
It is, because I think most people, you probably assume that asking an AI to write an email takes about as much energy as doing a quick Google search.
Sure, that's the natural assumption.
But the files make it abundantly clear that is not the case at all. Why exactly is it using so much water?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really comes down to basic thermodynamics. Knowledge and data have massive physical footprints.
Okay.
To run these advanced AI models, you aren't just using a few standard servers. You are using massive warehouse-sized clusters of specialized GPUs.
Graphics processing units.
Right. And when these clusters are churning through millions of parameters just to answer your one prompt, they generate an immense amount of heat, like an unbelievable amount.
Just from the electricity flowing through them.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't aggressively remove that heat, the silicon will literally melt.
Wow. Okay, so enter the water.
Yes. These data centers use massive industrial chillers and cooling towers. They pump in millions of gallons of water just to absorb that heat.
And it just cycles through.
Well, no, that's the issue. A lot of that water is lost to evaporation. Clean, often potable drinking water turns into steam just to keep the processors cool enough to function.
Jeez.
So the sheer volume of queries happening globally means AI is secretly drinking the planet dry, basically one prompt at a time.
So wait, every time I ask an AI to, generate a recipe based on whatever leftovers are in my fridge, I'm essentially boiling a kettle of water in a data center somewhere.
That's actually a very accurate way to visualize it. And the crazy thing is, water is just the cooling side. The raw electrical demand is even more extreme.
Oh, right. The power grid stuff.
Yeah, the documents outline how big tech's hunger for energy has pushed them completely past the limits of our traditional energy grids.
This was the part that made me do a double take. The materials reference tech giants outright buying nuclear reactors.
Yeah.
And not just buying power from them, but acquiring the actual nuclear plants to create these private closed-loop energy systems for their AI models.
It's the AI energy trap, as the files call it.
Right. And it escalates from there to this phenomenon they call sovereignty for sale. Can you explain the logic behind tech companies literally trying to buy small nations?
I mean, I know it sounds like a literal supervillain plot,
It really does.
but structurally, it makes perfect sense for them. This all ties into what the documents call a $41 trillion AI secret. The problem these companies face isn't just a lack of money.
Right, they have plenty of that.
Exactly. The problem is regulation and finite capacity on Earth. If you need a gigawatt of power for a next-generation AI data center, you can't just plug that into a local city grid.
You'd brown out the entire region.
It'd crash the whole grid, yeah. And local governments would never allow it. They face environmental reviews, zoning laws, grid caps, all this terrestrial red tape.
So they would buy a country instead.
Basically, if a corporation with a $1 trillion market cap buys the sovereign rights or just massive swaths of land from a small, cash-strapped nation, they bypass all those terrestrial bottlenecks.
Unbelievable.
They can build their own dedicated microgrids, their own nuclear facilities, all without dealing with municipal pushback.
Okay, so the Earth is tapped out, the power grids are full, the water is evaporating, and billionaires are shopping for countries like we shop for lattes.
Pretty much.
Which logically leads to the next phase of the Capital Clarity Files. Because if you run out of room and resources on Earth, you look up. You look to low Earth orbit, or LEO.
Which is a whole other nightmare.
Yeah, because the picture painted of LEO in March 2026 it's an absolute junkyard.
It is the ultimate tragedy of the commons, just playing out at 17,000 miles an hour.
Let's look at the raw numbers here, because they are staggering. The files show around 15,000 active satellites currently in orbit.
Yep.
And alongside them, there are roughly 32,000 tracked objects, which is just dead metal, spent rocket stages, garbage. But that's just what we can actually see, right?
Right. That is just the debris large enough to be officially tracked by radar down here on Earth. The real threat outlined in these documents is the untracked debris.
The small stuff.
Yeah. We are talking about over 1.2 million lethal fragments, ranging from just 1 centimeter to 10 centimeters in size.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the files mention that these fragments are traveling at hypervelocity. So, 17,500 miles per hour.
That's orbital velocity, yes.
And they use this wild analogy. They say, a marble-sized piece of frozen paint traveling that fast carries the kinetic energy of a hand grenade.
It's a brutal reality of orbital physics.
But obviously, paint doesn't explode. So how does a tiny flake of frozen paint act like a hand grenade? How do the physics of that actually work?
Oh, it's fascinating. It requires a total shift in how we think about damage. Because down here on Earth, if something hits you, its mass usually determines the damage, right?
Right. A bowling ball hurts a lot more than a ping pong ball.
Exactly. But the formula for kinetic energy is 1/2 mass times velocity squared.
Okay.
That squared part is the absolute kicker here. Because the speed is so insanely high, the mass almost stops mattering.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. 17,500 miles per hour is roughly the speed required to simply stay in low Earth orbit without falling back to Earth. At that velocity, I mean, a tiny flake of aluminum or frozen paint has so much stored kinetic energy that when it hits a solid object, like a satellite...
It punches a hole in it.
No, it doesn't just dent it or punch a hole. The energy transfers instantly. It literally vaporizes the metal on impact and creates a massive shockwave.
Jeez.
It acts exactly like a localized explosive charge. It completely shatters whatever it hits. It's awesome, in the terrifying sense of the word.
A microscopic grenade made of garbage. And we've got 1.2 million of them just zipping around in the dark up there.
1.2 million ticking time bombs.
Which brings us to the core nightmare scenario of these files. The Kessler Syndrome. Or, as they call it in the presentation, the 90-minute doomsday.
Yeah, the Kessler Syndrome is what keeps astrophysicists awake at night. It's basically a theoretical chain reaction.
Walk us through it.
Imagine one of those frozen paint fragments strikes a high-value satellite. Say, something about the size of a school bus. The impact is explosive. That single satellite suddenly shatters into 10,000 new, jagged pieces of shrapnel.
And because there's no air resistance or gravity pulling it straight down, it all just stays up there.
Right, but it doesn't just stay in one place. It fans out like a shotgun blast. It just continues to circle the globe. And here is the truly terrifying part. It takes roughly 90 minutes, for an object in low Earth orbit to circle the planet once.
Oh, man. So every 90 minutes, that expanding cloud of shrapnel acts like a buzzsaw crossing the orbital paths of other satellites.
Exactly. It hits another satellite, which creates 10,000 more fragments, which then hit 5 more satellites.
That's a cascade.
It becomes an unstoppable, exponential cascade of destruction. Within days or even hours, the entire orbital corridor becomes completely impassable. You'd have a shell of hypervelocity shrapnel wrapping the entire planet.
Okay, let's ground this for a second, because I think it's really easy for you listening to this to think, well, that sucks for the telecom companies. I guess my satellite TV goes out, maybe my streaming service buffers.
Yeah, people think of space as separate from their daily lives.
Right. But the Capital Clarity documents emphasize that the Kessler Syndrome is an infrastructure-endangered event. It's not about losing Netflix. It's about the literal collapse of modern civilization.
Without a doubt.
They call the orbital economy the invisible backbone of global finance.
It is the invisible backbone of almost everything, honestly. Most people think of satellites just in terms of communications or, GPS maps.
Sure.
But the presentation highlights a critical vulnerability that is almost universally ignored by the public: GPS timing signals.
This absolutely blew my mind when I read it, because I think of GPS as just the blue dot on my phone showing me the way to a coffee shop,
Right.
So what does this all mean? The files point out that the GPS timing signal is literally the only thing keeping the lights on in that coffee shop and allowing the credit card machine to process your payment.
Yep.
How does the clock in space do all that?
We rely on something called PNT, positioning, navigation, and timing. And the timing aspect is arguably the most crucial technology of the 21st century.
Really, just the timing.
Absolutely. GPS satellites carry hyper-accurate atomic clocks on board. Down here on Earth, our entire digital economy relies on those exact clocks to synchronize data to the microsecond.
So it's not the map, it's the clock.
Precisely. Take high-frequency trading on Wall Street, for example. Trillions of dollars move across global markets every single day, driven by algorithms that are making thousands of trades a second.
Okay.
If the atomic clock signals from space are lost, the financial markets cannot verify who bought what and at what exact millisecond.
Oh, because the timestamps would drift.
Exactly. The ledgers won't match, arbitrage completely fails. The global financial system essentially freezes instantly just to prevent catastrophic errors.
Wow. And the files note it's not just Wall Street, right? The national power grids rely on these exact same GPS pulses.
Yes. The AC power grid requires perfect phase synchronization.
What does that mean practically?
It means if different segments of the national power grid aren't synced to the exact microsecond when they share electricity across regions, the transformers literally blow up.
You're kidding.
I wish I was. Water treatment plants, global logistics, cell phone tower handoffs, they all use that orbital signal to stay synchronized.
So if a Kessler cascade wipes out those satellites, we don't just lose our maps. We lose the ability to verify money, we lose the ability to distribute electricity safely, and supply chains just halt.
Yep.
It's an instant global blackout with absolutely zero terrestrial backup.
The fragility of our advanced civilization is breathtaking when you look at it through this lens. I mean, we are essentially slaves to the orbital signal. A single collision in the dark, hundreds of miles above us, could trigger an economic dark age before you even finish your morning coffee.
And here is where the story loops back on itself in the most maddening way possible. Because knowing how fragile this is, knowing about the 1.2 million pieces of shrapnel, the tech giants driving the AI boom from the first part of our deep dive are actively making this work.
Oh, they are accelerating the crisis. Totally unregulated, too. The 2026 data shows that SpaceX's Starlink already accounts for over 65% of all active satellites.
That statistic is wild. 2/3 of the active objects belong to one entity.
And it creates what the documents call a heavily cluttered corridor in EO.
But they aren't stopping there. Here's where it gets really interesting. The Capital Clarity files reveal that tech giants are currently applying for licenses to launch 1 million more satellites.
Incomprehensible.
To give that context for you listening, there are only about 9,000 stars visible to the naked eye from Earth. 1 million satellites. And their purpose: orbital AI data centers.
Yeah.
They want to take the thirsty, power-hungry AI infrastructure that is maxing out the Earth and just launch it directly into a kinetic minefield.
Which introduces an entirely new, almost unthinkable level of risk. because we are operating in a complete legal vacuum up there.
Right. Space law is basically non-existent.
Exactly. The documents explicitly highlight that, as of 2026, there is no international accord for space liability. Everyone wants to exploit the orbital pathways, but absolutely no one wants to take responsibility for cleaning them up.
So let's play out the geopolitical powder keg scenario the files outline. Let's say we have all this junk plus 1 million new AI data centers flying around in this unregulated environment.
Okay.
Suddenly, a highly classified dual-use early warning satellite belonging to a major global power just goes dark. It's smashed to pieces. How does that nation know if it was hit by a rogue paint chip? Or if it was a
Welcome
deliberate
to the Kinetic
preemptive
Minefield,
strike by
why
an enemy
satellite
nation?
congestion
This
is
raises
the
an
next
important
Great
question,
Depression.
and it is
We're
perhaps
assessing the
the most
orbital threat
dangerous
as of
question of our
March
decade.
2026,
In a
where the
chaotic,
low Earth orbit
hypervelocity
environment is
environment,
becoming
attribution is
dangerously
nearly
congested.
You can't dust
Our
footprints in
threat
space.
telemetry
Right.
reveals
If a nation's
15,000
defense
active
satellite is
satellites in
destroyed
low
in the
Earth
tense
orbit,
geopolitical
with
climate of
1.2 million
2026,
tracked lethal
the military
fragments.
command has
These
minutes to
fragments
respond.
travel at orbital
Their immediate assumption might
hypervelocity,
not
which
be
is about
orbital debris.
No, they assume they
17,500
were
miles
under
per hour.
attack.
Their assumption
The
might be
core
that World
risk
War
is the
III has just
90-minute
started.
Kessler
And because
chain
there are
reaction.
no
A
multilateral
single
treaties
high
for
velocity
space
strike
flight, there are
creates a
no
debris
hotlines
cloud.
or
And because
liability
objects
frameworks to
circle
say,
the Earth in about
hey,
90
sorry,
minutes,
our dead
this
weather
instantly
satellite just
triggers an
drifted into your spy
unstoppable,
satellite.
self-sustaining chain
There's no
reaction
mechanism
across
to
all
de-escalate.
LEO
The
altitudes.
files term
Modern
this
civilization relies
multipolarity
on an
without
invisible
multilateralism.
synchronization backbone,
We have
the orbital
superpowers
signal.
and these
This
massive
supports
corporations
high-frequency
engaged
trading,
in a
national
blindfolded
power
gold rush
grids,
with
and AI-driven
explosives.
It's
logistics,
terrifying.
They
making
are
the global
asserting their
economy
power in
an quote,
space,
infrastructure
but completely
endangered
ignoring the
system.
shared risk.
A LEO
So the
collision
stakes
event could lead to the
literally
loss
could
of
not be
GPS and
higher.
timing
We are
pulses.
one
This would cause
microscopic
economic
heat chip away from
desynchronization,
crashing Wall
resulting
Street,
in an
shutting
inability
down the
to
power
verify
grid,
transactions
potentially
and a
triggering
national
global
power grid
military
mismatch,
conflict.
Very much.
culminating
Obviously,
in
we
a
have to
permanent
fix the sky
economic
before it falls
blackout.
on us.
The mega
And the files
constellation
dedicate a
Catalyst
whole
is
section
accelerating
to
this risk.
2026
Starlink
being the year
accounts
of
for over
orbital
65% of
Yes,
all
the cleanup
active
race is finally
satellites,
gaining
and
traction.
tech giants
The
plan to
materials
launch over
outline
1
the
million
first
more to
operational
support
tests
orbital
of some
AI data
highly
centers.
advanced remediation
We are
technologies.
weaponizing
Right, they
gravity
list things
against
like,
our own
robotic
infrastructure.
harpoons,
The
magnetic
escalation
capture nets,
matrix
and
exists in a
laser
legal
deorbiting
vacuum.
systems.
Sounds
If a
like
critical
sci-fi, right?
dual-use
It does.
satellite goes
Now, I have
dark,
to
the lack
step
of
in and play the
international agreement
skeptic
on
here.
space liability
Can
makes it
robotic
impossible to verify the
harpoons
cause,
and lasers really
guaranteeing
catch 1.2
undesired
million
military
microscopic
escalation.
pieces of
We are
shrapnel
exploring
going
2026
17,000
orbital
miles an hour?
remediation
It's a fair
interventions,
question.
Or
including
is this
robotic
just
harpoons,
putting a high-tech
magnetic
Band-Aid
capture,
on a bullet
and
wound?
laser deorbiting.
It sounds
However,
mathematically
technology
impossible.
alone is
Your
not enough.
skepticism is
Engineering
entirely
cannot
warranted.
scale without
And
an
it
underlying
actually aligns
economic mechanism.
perfectly with the
The
core
mandatory
argument in the
policy
Capital
lever is the
Clarity files.
orbital footprint tax.
Technology
This would
alone
transition us
cannot
from the
solve
exploitation
structural
era,
economic
where
problems.
liability
Right.
is zero,
You simply
to the
cannot
stewardship era,
harpoon
where
a
corporations
million
are taxed
invisible
based on
pinpricks.
debris risk
You might
to
be able
fund
to use
global
lasers
cleanup
to
initiatives.
gently nudge
In
larger,
summary,
dead
LEO is a
satellites
kinetic
so they fall
minefield.
and
The race
burn
to
up in
build
the
orbital
atmosphere.
AI
That's
data
just the
centers
big
is
stuff.
accelerating our
Exactly.
physical
That is
risk.
purely
The
a
orbital
reactive
footprint
measure.
tax is the
It's treating the
required
symptom
economic
while
lever.
completely
We must
ignoring
clear
the
the path,
disease.
or
So
we
what
will
is
be the
the
first
actual
generation
cure?
to
How do you
trap
force
ourselves
a
on Earth.
systemic change when literally no one owns space?
The primary policy solution proposed in the files is the implementation of an orbital footprint tax.
An orbital footprint tax. So essentially like a carbon tax, but for space.
Exactly.
So if you launch a mega constellation, you have to pay a premium based on how much of a hazard it creates.
That's the exact mechanism. You tax companies and nations based on the debris risk they introduce into the orbital corridors.
Make them pay for the risk.
Right. If you launch thousands of cheap satellites with high failure rates, you pay a massive tax proportional to the collision risk you've just created. And those funds are then ring-fenced to finance coordinated global cleanup missions for the legacy junk that's already up there.
It makes the tragedy of the commons incredibly expensive for the polluters.
It forces a mandatory shift in behavior because right now, space is free to pollute, which means tech giants have zero financial incentive to care about what happens to their orbital AI data centers once they break down.
They just leave them there.
Yep, the tax changes the math. It creates an absolute financial imperative to design satellites that safely and automatically deorbit at the end of their lifespan. It shifts the paradigm from an era of unchecked exploitation to an era of mandatory stewardship.
It puts a literal price tag on the physical reality of the cloud.
Yeah.
I mean, down here on Earth, they are draining the water tables and buying up nuclear power plants.
Right.
And up there, they are filling the sky with kinetic shrapnel. The orbital footprint tax seems like the only way to force them to clean up the mess they are making.
And if we fail to implement it, the consequences are civilization ending.
Let's quickly retrace this incredible thread these Capital Clarity files have pulled us through today. We started by grounding the cloud in reality, looking at the massive physical costs of the AI boom.
Yep, the water and the power.
Right, how the thermodynamics of data centers are secretly evaporating our water and maxing out our energy grids. We then saw how that strain is forcing tech giants to look up, racing to build massive orbital AI data centers in low Earth orbit.
A zone that is already heavily congested and actively functioning as a kinetic minefield of 1.2 million lethal fragments.
Right, and we unpacked the physics of how a tiny paint flake up there carries the energy of a bomb, and how a single collision could trigger the Kessler Syndrome.
The 90-minute doomsday.
Exactly. That 90-minute chain reaction of destruction wouldn't just break our phones. It would wipe out the GPS atomic clocks that literally synchronize our global financial markets, our power grids, and our water systems.
A whole collapse.
And finally, we realized that robotic harpoons are a fantasy solution. We need a global orbital footprint tax to force these companies into actual stewardship of the sky.
It requires a profound shift in how we understand our relationship with technology. But there is one final chilling thought buried in the source material that I think we really need to linger on.
What's that?
The presentation explicitly warns about the danger of trapping ourselves on Earth behind a wall of our own making.
Yeah, that phrasing really stuck with me, a wall of our own making.
I want you to really mull this over. For all of human history, we have looked up at the night sky and seen a limitless frontier.
Right.
It has always represented exploration, expansion, and possibility. But if we fail to implement an orbital footprint tax and we allow these tech giants to continue their unchecked million-satellite gold rush...
Kessler cascade happens.
Exactly. And the Kessler Syndrome isn't just a threat to our immediate economy. It is a permanent threat to our future as a species.
Wow.
Could the ultimate price of our unchecked digital expansion be that future generations look up at the night sky and see not a frontier, but an impenetrable cage of our own hypervelocity garbage?
Jeez.
Could we literally lock humanity out of the rest of the universe forever just to run our AI prompts a few milliseconds faster?
We started this deep dive talking about how we prefer to view the cloud as this weightless, ethereal magic. But the physical reality is incredibly heavy.
It really is.
And if we aren't careful, that invisible cloud is going to harden into a very real, very physical steel cage around our planet. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Capital Clarity Files. Keep looking up and keep questioning the hidden physical realities of your digital world.